Thank you. To ask the Scottish Minister First Minister, if any objections or concerns are raised by Scottish ministers about the guidelines for sentencing under 25s in Scotland, which came into effect in January 2022.
First Minister.
In line with requirements agreed by this Parliament, the content of sentencing guidelines is, of course, entirely a matter for the independent judge-led Scottish Sentencing Council. As part of the consultation the Council undertakes on guidelines, Scottish ministers were cited on a near final draft of the guideline. I replied at the time as Cabinet Secretary for Justice, noting that the Council had taken an evidence-led, collaborative approach in developing the draft guideline, promoting rehabilitation, early intervention and alternatives to custody, and ultimately working to reduce reoffending. I'm pleased that reoffending levels have fallen over the last decade, and this is helping to keep our communities safe. It should be noted that the position in the guideline is that custody is, of course, still an option for sentencing young people, and is, of course, completely right that this option remains available to the court in any given case. The Cabinet Secretary for Justice and Home Affairs, Angela Constant, met very recently with Lady Dorrian to discuss how the Council plans to keep these guidelines under review.
Pauline McNeill.
We know that there have been at least 2 reported cases where there is public concern about the leniency of sentencing. Firstly, in the case where there was no jail sentence for the rape of a 13-year-old girl, but secondly, on the horrific rape and murder of Joe Barclay, where there was a reduction in sentence of 4 years. So the First Minister has confirmed today that he sees no role for the Parliament, but only for the Sentencing Council. It seems that it's nothing to do with this Parliament as far as the First Minister is concerned. Now, I wonder if it's a very significant change in sentencing policy. Now, is the First Minister aware that this Parliament did have a say when it came to the discounting of sentencing in relation to early pleas? So I don't understand why at least Parliament wouldn't have a say in this. When it comes to horrific crimes as serious as rape and murder, does the First Minister believe that there should be a reduced sentence for under 25s? But at least could he give Parliament some comfort that he believes that this Parliament should have some oversight on significant changes to sentencing policy in Scotland?
First Minister.
What I would say to Pauline McNeill, who I know has a long-standing interest in these matters, is that, of course, there was a public consultation when it came to the guideline. Now, I don't know whether Pauline McNeill or the Scottish Labour Party responded to that public consultation, but every single guideline does go through that public consultation process. Quite a lengthy process before that guideline is eventually approved by the High Court. And of course, as I said, from a Scottish Government perspective, we did respond to the guideline at the time. What I also say to Pauline McNeill, and I'm happy to send her more details, she may have seen this already, of course, when it comes to this particular guideline, there is a mountain of evidence, about 122 pages of Edinburgh University research, which helped to inform that sentencing guideline when it came to the issues of cognitive maturity within the justice system, and particularly amongst young people. So for me, it's absolutely right that the decisions on sentencing are for the independent judiciary. Now, where the Parliament has an interest, of course, it is fine for Pauline McNeill to bring forward a Members' Bill. If she thinks the Government should be bringing forward legislation on a matter, I'm more than happy to consider that. But it must be the case, it must always be the case, even in those cases where there are particularly heinous crimes, that sentencing is always a matter for the independent judiciary and should be free from any political interference whatsoever.